Hi, I'm Lori.
And I'm Kevin, and this is No Longer Ashamed.
We are survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
And we're here to share with you that if you're a survivor, you don't have to be alone.
Our logo is a salamander, and the reason is a fire salamander can survive a fire, and you have survived a fire.
We want to help you with your journey to healing and hope.
We are all survivors together, and we walk this journey together, and you are not alone.
By telling our stories, we are hoping that you will have the courage to share your stories as well and find your voice.
Because stories are so important, and for so long I know that I wouldn't tell my story, but when I finally shared my story, that's when I got my freedom.
And this is our journey and your journey to healing and hope. So come with us.
So this week in Illinois, they found out that the Catholic clergy sexually abused far more kids than was previously acknowledged. And now they say more than 450 Catholic clergy in Illinois sexually abused nearly 2,000 children since 1950, the state's attorney general found. And they also say because of the statute of limitations has expired in many of those cases, that most of those abusers will never see justice in a legal sense. And so where is the outrage? The problem is the statute of limitations. So many states have not addressed the issue of changing their statute of limitations. This year, Washington state had legislature to try to change, to drop or lower their statute of limitations, and they did not. And one of the reasons they stated for not doing it is they said it would be too expensive for the state because of the lawsuits involving previous abuse cases. So basically, they declined to drop the statute of limitations because it would cost them money. They don't care about the abusers that are getting away without any justice. They don't care about the lives of the children who were destroyed by the abuse. They're afraid they're going to have to pay for the past abuse. And so they're not going to address the statute of limitations.
It's so heartbreaking. And on murder, there is no statute of limitation.
No.
And when we look at childhood sexual abuse, you're a kid, so you can't go to the authorities. You don't know any better. Oftentimes it's kids that are 3 to 5, if not in that age range. And you figure 7 years from that, they're still teenagers. They don't know they can go to the police. They don't know. And so how could they ever possibly do anything? It's asinine.
And we've talked about before, for men, it's the general
26 years.
Takes is 26 years. 26 years. So I looked at the statute of limitations in states, and they vary throughout. And there's a few states that don't have statute of limitations.
Would one be Utah because of what Evreme is doing?
I don't remember if it was Utah. I don't have the stats right now, but I know I believe California is one of the states that overturned their statute of limitations for sexual abuse, but it's still not widespread. It's still the issue in most states in our country that because if you're abused as a child, and very few kids even go to an adult and tell them what happened, let alone go to the law enforcement. And if they go to adult, then it's up to the adult to go to law enforcement, and that usually doesn't happen. And it's pretty basically what they believe is 90% of perpetrators don't get arrested or serve time. 90%. And that's an estimation because they don't know the extent. Just like this case in Illinois, they're just now determining that there were at least 450 clergymen and nearly 2,000 cases. That's a lot more than they thought, a lot more than the Catholic Church was admitting at first. And so how do we change this? There has to be a change in order for there to be a deterrence. I mean, what deterrence is there now? There's so little deterrence for abusers now because they know so few cases actually go to trial, let alone few actually serve time? How do we have effective deterrence with the statute of limitations being so strict in so many states?
I know just when I tried to look it up, I tried to find the woman that was proposing it. I tried to find the news article and I could not find anything. And so it feels like there's powers that be are hiding. I could be wrong, but it feels like it's making it so hard for people to even understand or know that this is something. And I remember when I went to the police as a young adult and talked about what I had gone through, they said, well, statute of limitations.
Yeah.
Sorry that happened, but there's nothing we can do.
And it's funny when you mentioned that about trying to find that article. When it came out, it was in the newspaper, but when I tried to look at it again, I could not find it. I didn't save the paper. And when I tried to, look back and track it, I could not find it. And it's almost like it was just shoved under a rock because no one wants anyone to know that our legislators are afraid of having to pay. And that's why they're just basically, that's the motivation, is to not changing the laws, is that they can't afford it.
Yeah. I love it when you said, where is the outrage? Because something has to be done. And the problem is a lot of us don't know how to make change. For instance, we do this podcast because we want to bring awareness. So let's bring awareness to this. And maybe someone listening will be like, I know what you have to do to pass whatever it is. Maybe we need to go and get people to sign a petition. I don't know what it takes, but I feel like if we had some direction, we could at least get the ball rolling, if we could even find the person that was working on it. But your wife, Charnel, and I both searched and searched to try to find her. We wanted to have her on the show. We wanted to talk to her. We can't find anything. What is that? I mean, I work in news. I work in radio. I find articles. I find things, and I can't find anything.
I think it would take someone to go and start petition and trying to get people to sign it. And the problem is that has to happen state by state. Mm-hmm. The statute of limitations are determined by each state, not by federal.
So in Washington state, what can we do? And maybe, like you said, maybe in another state, it might be a whole different process, but it would be really great if somebody listening knows where we could start or who we could talk to, or someone that would be willing to kind of start to take this on.
Yeah, we should talk to Avreme again.
Yeah.
Since that's what he was, that was one of his driving forces, was to get the statute of limitations changed.
Well, he works with Elizabeth Smart, and so her organization might have some info and we could talk with them. And then, Julie's organization just partnered with Elizabeth Smart as well. And so maybe that is something that we can reach out to our people we've interviewed and see what they know and how they can help. And just on a side note, Julie's book is out. Julie from I'm on Watch shadowed How I Became the Trafficked Mother Next Door. And I haven't read it yet, but we did talk about it. And I'm so glad she was so brave to put this out because, again, and I think that's why the statute of limitations, there's not a lot of victims that have come forward. So who's going to stand up for this to change if the victims don't come forward?
Yeah. And not only that, but there's an article recently about how women who have been trafficked, especially underage women who have been trafficked, who are ending up being prosecuted for sexual crimes. Mm-hmm. And they are the ones getting prosecuted instead of their abusers, instead of the men or women trafficking them. And then there's cases of them that when they defend themselves, if they try to escape this, they end up in jail because of what they do to escape. And there are women in jail because they fought against their trafficker and they killed them or assaulted them, and then they end up in jail.
And you know why? Because often a victim will go after their abuser when the abuser is sedated, drunk, sleeping.
Yes.
And so this is what happens. The law of self-defense, it actually is stated that you have to be actually in an altercation. So they end up in prison, these victims, because they're not actually physically in a state of being attacked, But in their mind, they know if they don't kill that person's going to kill them the next day or the next day. And so that's another faulty law that is getting victims in trouble because they can't fight back in the moment. They're not strong enough. Their children, their women, their abuser is bigger and stronger. So they wait till they're asleep. They go after them. And because it's not in the moment, it's not considered self-defense.
Yeah. So they end up in prison. Mm-hmm. And all they were doing was trying to get out of the situation that their traffickers had put them in.
Yeah. Some change needs to happen. And I think now that people are starting to come out and starting to share their stories, that maybe this will start a movement of starting to get some of these laws changed.
Yeah. There has to be outrage.
We know someone that killed her abuser and went to prison for years. And the thing is he was sleeping. And so she went in and she killed him because she couldn't get away from him. He had total control over her and it wasn't in the heat of the moment. And so she went to prison and it's almost like I can either stay and be abused or maybe be killed, or I can go to prison. There isn't another option because for some of these women, they can't get away. And so again, that's another law that needs to, or ruling that has to be addressed to help people to be able to have some choices.
Yeah. I mean, when the enforcement throws them in jail for sexual crimes, they don't go after the trafficker. They go after the women who are being trafficked.
But I will say, when a woman is in that situation, she will protect her trafficker at all costs, because if the police don't do what they have to do to get that man will then kill her.
Yeah, they have to defend themselves, so they can't,
they have to defend their abuser.
Because it's a catch-22 for them.
It is.
They have no way out.
No, and even remember Elizabeth Smart, when the police found her, she would not tell them anything because she believed if they let her go and she said anything and they didn't get him, he would then kill her. So she was so afraid to tell the police. So the police might need some more training in how to actually protect the person so that they could tell them and then they could go after the abuser. But it's just such a web of deceit. And because when someone's being victimized, they know if they do anything wrong. Julie said there were times when he would drag her out of the car by her hair on the freeway. Yeah. And nobody would stop.
Nobody would stop. Nobody would do anything. And so, of course, she felt like she had no way out.
So I think, Kevin, it's really good to bring this to light, but also to put out a plea if anybody knows anything, or if there's ways that we can begin to do this, or what we have to look in, if we have to write letters to a legislator, what do we have to do? Or do we have to wait a whole nother cycle? I think that's the problem when we don't know anything about political type of things. We don't know what to do, but we know there's a problem. And, when we see that there's a problem, then it's our job to somehow, some way get somebody on it or make something happen.
Yeah. I mean, when I saw that article, I was just dumbfounded, mostly that they wouldn't drop the statute of limitations because there's no logical reason for the statute of limitations. And then when they openly admitted in the article, the legislators openly admitted the reason they didn't do it was because it was going to cost the state money in future lawsuits, and they didn't want to be liable for that. And
that's messed up.
And when you look at how few lawsuits actually go to court and few abusers actually end up being tried and getting justice, that it seems like the system is rigged against us. But I think it is time to bring awareness to this issue, because it's just amazing. In Illinois, they said most of them will never come to justice because of the statute of limitations. And yet they don't mention anything about wanting to change that, or maybe this is time to change the statute of limitations.
The danger in that is that's when vigilantes step in and they're like, if you're not going to take care of this abuser, I am. So really, they're cutting off their own nose because they're going to have all kinds of other problems.
Yeah, and we don't want vigilante justice because that is not justice, but we do want someone to address this issue. So I guess it is going to take people like us finding out, how can we address this? How do we bring awareness to these issues in these states? And why is it that some states were willing to drop the statute of limitations for sexual abuse cases, and yet the other states, what's their reasoning? And call them out on it.
Mhm.
Call them out on the statistics. You know, the majority of childhood sexual abuse cases, the majority of those survivors don't talk about it until they're adults.
Right.
So how is the statute of limitations even have any bearing on that? It doesn't make sense. And that's what we need to bring awareness to, is this just doesn't make sense. And we have to try to make it.
Right. And so here's the thing. If a person is abused and they miss the statute of limitations, but say they decide to do something about their abuser and they kill them, that statute of limitation, there is none.
Yeah.
So see how wrong that is?
Yeah. Well,
So,
and of course,
not that we want vigilante, not that we want people to take it into their own hands, but if they do, they can't get served on this end, and on this end, there's no limit. They could be prosecuted till they're 100 years old.
yeah, and if they feel that, you know, there will never be justice for their abuser, you know, they might feel just in order to prevent that abuser from abusing others, they have to do something. And that's the problem.
Right.
If there is no justice, if for someone coming forward against someone, how do we prevent them from continuing their abuse? I mean, this is about prevention now. We need to get rid of the statute of limitations. There's all these priests that are off scot-free, even though they abused, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. The clergy obviously just shuffled them around so that they wouldn't be found out. And so where's the justice? There is none.
There isn't any.
We need to find a way to get the word out that this system is rigged against survivors. And I think people, because of the high profile cases that have been, they think that that the system has changed, but it hasn't. It's just that there's more cases coming forward. There's more high profile cases coming forward. But the fact is, the system hasn't changed. It's still rigged against survivors.
Right. And the only, I want to say hope, but it's not hope, is like when you look at that doctor, that Olympic doctor.
Yeah.
He was still doing it. And that's the only reason he got caught, because the ones that were older, their statute of limitations was up.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. If, you know, there's no prevention due to the statute of limitations, because the people that are coming forward, they can't file a case against them because their statute of limitations have run up. But if the perpetrator is still abusing, it takes someone who's recent enough to file. And often that doesn't happen because, as we know, it generally takes people years to report their abuse. And by that time, the statute of limitations will prevent them from being able to do anything. Mm-hmm. So it's almost as if they just don't want to deal with these cases, as the state of Washington legislators admit. Right. They can't afford it. Because
so think about this. Yeah, they can't afford it, but think about this. So I missed my statute of limitations. However, the person who abused me was working at summer camps. And so I called the summer camps to warn them. And they say, well, does that person have a conviction? Well, no, because there was the statute of limitation. So who are they? They're not going to believe me. Now I can't even protect other kids.
Yeah. And part of the problem is, in most cases, it's a he said, she said, or, you know, the child is versus the adult. And it's whether who is more believable. And it takes
and there were other kids and neighbor kids, but our statute of limitation.
Yeah. So I think the only recourse is to file a civil case and then try and prove in a civil case that this abuse happened, and you'll get a settlement, but they won't serve time.
And that's the whole thing, is that the whole thing is you want to protect the next person by making sure they get some sort of conviction.
Yes.
Yeah.
You want them in prison away from people they will perpetrate against.
Exactly.
And so how do we do this? We have to. I think this is going to be something we're going to look into, is what is the statute of limitations in all the states and why are they that way?
Yeah. But seriously, I think the most important thing is whatever state you're in. If you're listening in North Dakota, then you check into yours. We'll look into Washington. We can barely do our own state, let alone every state.
Yeah, we
but
can.
If we look into Washington, if somebody listening knows how that works and can walk us through it, or someone's willing to go, you know what, I'm going to take that on if you're going to back me, and we'll have you on the show. We'll talk about what we can do so that other states can hop on board as well. But I think it's going to take, because the research that I have tried to do has not given me anything, not even the name of the person who did all the hard work to try to take that in. So, I think that there's a little more going on here. And even if we could find that person might be able to go, okay, let's do it again. And this time we'll come back in more force or with more money or whatever it's going to take.
I think one of the things that's keeping people from being outraged about this is people don't realize how widespread sexual abuse is. They don't understand. They don't realize that 1 in 6 men at least and 1 in 4 women at least, that statistic needs to be more widespread. People need to realize that it's that
and it's probably more than 1 in 6, because they don't tell. So look at the homeless in Seattle and the drugs. Look at the prisons. We know that most of those people, most people that have gotten on drugs have some sort of childhood trauma. Almost, what is the statistic in prison? Somebody told you that works in prison. When we look at those numbers, we have to do something. That could change everything. If we could get it so people could do what they need to do to get recovery and to confront their abuser if they need to, and actually get some results, that might change our homeless numbers. That might change our prison numbers.
Yeah. And if we start prosecuting effectively these perpetrators, it might actually change. It might be the discouragement that is needed. That we need this deterrence as well as awareness. Awareness is really important because so many people aren't aware of the scope, but we also need deterrence because so many perpetrators get away with no justice at all, with absolutely nothing. And so that's the 2 keys right here, awareness and deterrence. Mm-hmm. I think that all boils down to outrage. There needs to be outrage. Where is the outrage? Because this is just ridiculous. When I saw that article about the clergy in Illinois and the prosecutors just saying, most of them will never get justice because of statute of limitations. And it's like they just are resigned to the fact that we're just not going to even bother prosecuting them. Why bother? They got away with it. Oh no. So what? We can't do anything about it. There has to be change. There has to be change in order to prevent this from continuing. And no one's actually putting in the time to make this change.
Well, I think people are, because if the legislator turned it down, somebody did an awful lot of work to get it there. So I think there are people, and if we can find them and we can get behind them, that's, I think, what's going to make the difference. I don't think it's that nobody's doing it. I think it's that because when the whole Bill Cosby thing happened, that's that statute of limitations. So a lot of those women went to work in their different states because there were so many different states, and they went to work to change. And some of them were very successful. Some were not, to get those laws changed because, once they finally came forward, because they knew no one would believe them, it had been 7 years. And so a lot of them are working on it. So I think the work is being done. I think if we could just find out where and how and get behind them, that we don't need to reinvent the wheel, but once people become aware, now where do we send them to go to help in their state to get the work done?
Yeah, that is going to be the key. How do we?
So you can reach out to us. I think you can respond on the podcast, or you can go to our Facebook page, No Longer Ashamed, and you can message us from there if you have information or can help us get things rolling or know who's doing what. We appreciate anything that you have to offer.
Yeah, and information about the statute of limitations, where you are, and what needs to change.
We know what needs to change. We just need to know how and what.
Yeah, there are a few states that don't have statutes of limitations for child sexual abuse, but only a few. And we want to talk about why hasn't that changed? What is the reasoning?
Like you said, for Seattle, for Washington, it's money.
Yep.
And so awareness is the only thing that's going to help people go, oh, we didn't know that was a thing. We'll get on board. I think people, especially people who have been abused, like I didn't want to go and report. And then when I knew there was a statute of limitations, I didn't want to report, but I knew I had to go report because of the work they were doing. So I did. And even though I did, too bad, so sad.
Yeah.
So I think people they feel powerless. But if there was a way to direct that, a place to put it, something to sign, somewhere to go. And I think if we can learn how to do that, we can get an army. We need an army.
Yeah.
Fight this.
It has to happen. So
we have to look to our future, and we have to look at the children, because if it's not happening now, it's not going to happen for them. And we know right now how many kids are being abused right while we're talking. And it's going to take them how many years before they can ever have the courage to say anything because they've been threatened. And then it's going to be a whole nother generation that can't come forward because nothing's going to be done.
Yeah. Without deterrence, there's no reason for them to stop.
Mm-hmm. So, well, and I want to talk about this another time, but I've been following the Menendez brothers, and they're coming up. They're trying to get them released after, is it 30 years? Because, they were seen as and depicted as rich, bratty kids, but they were being abused by their dad. Well, it wasn't until a musical group, I can't remember the name of the group, but what they did, it was like, Backstreet Boys or something. It was in another country, but they kept rotating the boys. So every time a boy would turn 18, they'd replace him with a 15-year-old. So the group never aged, but many of those boys were abused by the Menendez's father.
Menendez,
yes. And they finally came out, but nobody believed them. And when they were going to trial, they tried to tell people what had happened. And some people even said, we wish we had a dad like yours. So it's like, it's so hard because people aren't believed. And like even this thing in Illinois, I haven't read the article, but I just can't even imagine what it would be like for them to be like, not only first was it not even acknowledged, but then when it was finally put out in the open, it's just like a brush off. I can't even imagine what that would be like for those thousands and thousands of young men.
Yep. And most of them will never see any justice because the state basically has decided to put a time limit on how long you get to report it.
Yeah. And if they did, like you said, a civil suit, a class action suit or something, they'd sue the church. I mean, that the person, the abuser, I mean, yeah, maybe the church needs to suffer for covering up, but the abuser isn't going to pay the price. And that's what's tragic. It's tragic.
It is.
So
needs to change. And so
when we know better, we do better. So now that we're saying it, we also take responsibility and start to figure out what we can do and how we can support anybody doing the work. So we accept that responsibility.
Yeah.
Big one.
Time to do some research.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it for today.
We are going to have a prayer time if you want to stick with us. If not, we believe in you.
We want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories.
If you like this podcast, please rate and review, because that's how other people can find us. And we really want to spread this message.
Well, Father, I just thank you for your wisdom and your guidance in our lives. Lord, I just pray for your intercession in this issue. Pray that you would guide us to those we need to talk to and find out, and guide those who are listening, if they have information, to send it our way, that we can use that information to change this issue, to address this issue of statute of limitations and how it's preventing people from getting justice. Lord, I know you are the God of justice, and we just pray for your guidance and wisdom in this, and also that you would inspire those that would be able to make change, to do the things that can be done. And Lord, I just pray for those who were abused in Illinois, those children that were abused by priests, that you would be alongside them and giving them grace in their lives and giving them hope in their lives, Lord, even though they may be feeling hopeless, they may be feeling like they've been abandoned by the church and the system, that you would reassure them that you are there with them, and you want to heal their lives, Lord, and to continue to bless them and give them hope. Lord, I just pray for those kids that were abused, that they're adults now, those adults that are realizing that they have run up against the system and it's rigged against them. Lord, I just pray that you would give them hope that they can make changes. And I just pray for change in our system, that people will become aware of what is happening and why we need to make changes. And I just pray that we would be inspired to do the work to help make those changes. In your name I pray.
Father, we know that forgiveness is hard when there's justice. So I can't imagine trying to forgive when there is no justice. But Father, we know forgiveness is about us and not the perpetrator. But Lord, as we move forward in this, I pray that you will guide the way, open the doors, show us the work. We know we don't expect it to be easy, but even finding something rather than nothing, that as we know better, we do better, Lord, that you will just show us the way, pave the way, and take the responsibility of knowing, because once we know, then it is our responsibility to protect the next generation. And so, Lord, I pray for somebody listening, you'll put it heavy on their heart if they know what to do or who to contact, and that we can do what we can to make change, because we know that that's important. And we thank you so much for just that you are a good God in spite of terrible things happening, and that we can look to you, and that we can have a life, and a life beyond that, on the other side of all the terribleness, but sharing our story and getting help can give us freedom. And we thank you for that. In your son's holy name, amen.
Amen.